The stars looked different this far from Earth. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and watched the view screen display a system no human had ever visited before. 6 months of travel had brought them to Kepler 442, a region marked on their charts as unexplored territory. His job was simple: map the system, check for resources, and move on to the next destination. Jake was 42 years old and had spent half his life in space. He had seen gas giants with storms larger than Earth, asteroid fields that stretched for millions of miles, and dead worlds that once held oceans. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. "Captain, I'm getting something strange from the fourth planet," Katie Sullivan said from her station. She was the science officer, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped asking questions. "There's a structure down there. A big one." Jake walked over to her console and looked at the scan results. The structure showed up as a bright spot on the thermal imaging, standing out against the cold desert surface of the planet below. It was geometric, too perfect to be natural, and it was putting out a faint energy signature. How big? "About 200 meters tall. Pyramid shape?" Katie said, her fingers moving across the controls to get a better image. "And Captain, the material doesn't match anything in our database. This thing is old. Really old." Jake felt his pulse quicken. First contact protocols were clear. Any sign of alien civilization had to be investigated and reported immediately. He turned to his communications officer. "Send a full report to Earth Command. Let them know we've found something." "Yes, sir," the young officer replied. Jake looked back at the planet on the screen. The fourth world of Kepler, 442, was a dead place. No atmosphere worth mentioning. No water. No life. But someone had built something there, and they had built it to last. "Prepare an away team," Jake said. "Katie, you're with me. Ben, get your security team ready. And find Lisa. Tell her we need her expertise." Ben Carter nodded and left the bridge. He was head of security, a quiet man who had served in the Earth Defense Forces before joining the exploration program. If there was danger down there, Ben would know how to handle it. 20 minutes later, Jake stood in the shuttle bay with his team. Katie checked her scanning equipment one more time. Ben and 2 security officers carried weapons, standard procedure for unknown situations. Lisa Grant, the ship's xenoarchaeologist, looked more excited than nervous. She had spent her whole career studying alien ruins, but most of what she examined were fragments and broken pieces. This was something complete. The shuttle ride down was smooth. The planet had almost no atmosphere to create turbulence. As they got closer, Kringdard, the structure came into full view. It was a pyramid made of crystal, but not like any crystal found on Earth. The material seemed to shift colors in the dim light of the distant star, moving from deep blue to purple to something that looked almost like liquid silver. Jake landed the shuttle 100 meters from the base of the pyramid. The team put on their suits and stepped out onto the planet's surface. The gravity was light, about 80% of Earth normal, and the temperature was far below freezing. "Stay close," Ben said, his voice coming through the helmet radio. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." Quote, they walked toward the pyramid slowly. The structure was even more impressive up close. The walls were smooth and flawless, without a single crack or chip despite what had to be countless years of exposure to the elements. Katie ran her scanner over the surface and shook her head in amazement. "This is impossible," she said. "According to these readings, this structure is at least 3 million years old. Maybe older." 3 million? Jake repeated. "The decay rate doesn't lie, Captain. Whatever built this did it long before humans even existed." They found an entrance on the north side of the pyramid, a doorway that seemed to open as they approached. The opening revealed a corridor that led down into darkness. Jake switched on his helmet light, and the others did the same. Inside, the pyramid was hollow, a vast chamber that rose up toward the peak high above them. The walls were covered in symbols and images, thousands of them, carved or maybe grown into the crystal surface. They glowed with a soft light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered. She moved to the nearest wall and began examining the symbols. "This is a language, a written language. And these images, they're star maps. Look, that's the Orion Nebula. And that's the Andromeda Galaxy." Jake walked deeper into the chamber. In the center was a raised platform with what looked like a control panel. Though the symbols and interfaces were completely alien, Katie approached it carefully and took out her portable computer. "I'm going to try to interface with this," she said. "Maybe we can access whatever information is stored here." "Be careful," Jake warned. Katie connected her computer to the alien panel using a universal adapter. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the pyramid came alive. Light flared across every surface. The symbols began to move and rearrange themselves. A hologram appeared above the central platform, showing images that cycled through scenes of alien civilizations, vast cities, ships traveling between stars, and species that looked nothing like humans. Lisa worked frantically, recording everything and trying to understand the symbols. She had studied ancient languages her entire career, looking for patterns and connections. Hours passed as the team explored the chamber, and Lisa slowly began to piece together the message. "I think I've got something," she finally said. Her voice sounded shaken. Jake joined her at a section of wall where she had been working. Lisa pointed to a sequence of symbols that she had translated into English on her tablet. "This pyramid is a warning," Lisa said. "The species that built it called themselves the Architects. They were part of some kind of alliance, 12 different species working together, but they're all gone now. They left these warnings behind, before they disappeared." Quote, "Warning about what?" Jake asked. Lisa took a deep breath. "About us. About humans." Katie looked up from her work at the control panel. "That can't be right. How could they know about humans 3 million years ago?" "They sent probes," Lisa said, pointing to another series of images. "They explored thousands of worlds, studied countless species, and they found Earth. They watched as life evolved there. They saw the dinosaurs die out. They saw mammals rise. And they saw early humans appear. Dinosaurs. And I for Potter. What did they see that scared them?" Ben asked. He had moved closer, listening to every word. Lisa scrolled through her translations, her hands shaking slightly. "They saw a species that survived things that should have killed it. Ice ages, volcanic winters, droughts, predators. Every time something tried to wipe out early humans, they adapted and survived. The Architects called humans the ones who refused to fall. They wrote that humans had something no other species possessed." "What?" Jake asked. "The inability to accept defeat," Lisa said quietly. "They said humans would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They would survive on almost no food or water. They would cross impossible distances to find new homes. The Architects saw all this and they were afraid. They wrote that one day humans would reach the stars, and when they did, nothing would be able to stop them." The chamber fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the alien technology. Jake looked around at the walls covered in warnings, at the star maps showing Earth's location, at the images of early humans struggling to survive in a harsh world. "They were afraid of us," Katie said softly. "An advanced civilization that could build all this. And they were afraid of primitive humans." "Not primitive humans," Lisa corrected. "They were afraid of what humans would become. They predicted we would master fire, create tools, split the atom, and eventually travel between stars. Every prediction came true, and they left warnings all across the galaxy to tell other species that humans were coming." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold planet outside. "We need to report this immediately. Earth Command needs to know what we've found." "Captain," Katie said from the control panel. "There's more. This isn't the only warning beacon. According to this data, The architects built hundreds of these pyramids on different worlds. They wanted to make sure the message was heard. "What else does it say?" Jake asked. Katie read from her screen, her voice steady but her words chilling. "It says that humans will never bow to superior force. That they will never stop pushing forward, no matter the cost. That they would rather die than surrender." The architects believed that humans were the most dangerous species that would ever exist. Jake looked at his team. Then, back at the glowing walls around them. Somewhere out there, other species might be reading these same warnings. They might be preparing for the day when humans arrived in their space. They might see humanity as a threat that needed to be stopped. "Finish the recordings," Jake ordered. "Document everything. We leave in 1 hour." As the team worked to gather all the data they could, Jake stood alone and thought about what this discovery meant. The architects had been right about many things. Humans had survived against all odds. They had reached the stars. But were they really the threat that the prophecy described? Or was there something the ancient aliens had missed? Something they couldn't understand about what made humans human? The questions would have to wait. Right now, they needed to get this information back to Earth. The galaxy had been warned about humanity long before humans even knew aliens existed. Now it was time to find out what that warning would mean for the future. The message reached Earth Command 3 days later. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the horizon's edge as the response came through. Admiral Ryan Palmer wanted a full briefing, and he wanted it immediately. The Admiral's face appeared on the view screen, his expression serious. "Captain Morrison, I've read your report twice, and I still can't believe it." He was an older man with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of military service. "You're telling me that an alien civilization predicted humanity's rise millions of years ago and left warnings about us across the galaxy?" "Yes, sir," Jake replied. "Lisa Grant has translated about 40% of the text so far. Everything points to the same conclusion. The architects saw early humans and predicted exactly what we would become." Palmer rubbed his temples. "This changes everything. If there are hundreds of these warning beacons out there, other species might have found them. They might already know about us and see us as a threat." "That's our concern as well, sir," Jake said. "I'm calling an emergency council meeting at Luna Base," Palmer said. "Every department head, every specialist we have. We need to understand what we're dealing with. In the meantime, continue your analysis of that structure. Send us everything you find." The transmission ended, and Jake turned to his crew. Katie was still working on translating more of the alien text. Ben had his security team running drills, preparing for any possible scenario. Lisa spent every waking hour studying the recordings they had made inside the pyramid. Over the next week, more discoveries came in from other human ships, exploring distant systems. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Lieutenant Sam Hughes, commanding a scout vessel in the Proxima system, found another pyramid identical to the one Jake's team had discovered. The message was the same. Humans were coming, and they were dangerous. Dr. Ellen Price, leading a research team on a mining colony, found ruins on a moon in the Tau Ceti system. These weren't pyramids, but underground chambers, filled with the same warnings. The architects had been thorough in their effort to warn the galaxy about humanity. Each new discovery added more details to the prophecy. The architects had not just feared human violence. They had feared human persistence. The way humans never gave up, even when defeat seemed certain. They had documented how early humans would track wounded animals for days, following blood trails across vast distances until their prey finally collapsed. The aliens had watched as humans survived the ice ages by moving, adapting, and learning. They saw humans cross oceans on primitive boats, climb mountains that touched the sky, and spread to every corner of their world. No environment was too harsh. No challenge too great. Humans always found a way. Back on Earth, Commander Amy Collins read the reports with growing concern. She was in charge of first contact protocols, the rules and procedures for how humanity would interact with alien species if they ever met them. Those protocols had been written with the assumption that humans would be the less advanced species, the ones reaching out to civilizations more powerful than themselves. Now everything was different. The galaxy might already know about humans, and might already fear them. First contact could be hostile from the very start. Amy called a meeting with her team. They gathered in a secure conference room deep inside Luna Base, the command center that orbited Earth's moon. Maps of known space covered the walls, showing the locations where warning beacons had been found. The cluster of discoveries was growing larger each day. "We have to assume that other species have found these warnings," Amy said to the group. "We need to prepare for multiple scenarios. Best case, they see the warnings as ancient history and judge us on our current actions. Worst case, they see us as an existential threat and act accordingly." "What about the middle ground?" asked Paul Dennett, one of her senior negotiators. He was a calm man who had spent years working on conflict resolution between Earth nations. "Maybe some species will be curious, others hostile, and some neutral. We should prepare for all possibilities." "Agreed," Amy said. "Start drafting first contact scenarios. I want protocols for friendly contact, neutral contact, and hostile contact. We need to be ready for anything." Meanwhile, Lisa Grant made a breakthrough in her translation work. She had been struggling with a section of text that seemed different from the rest, more personal somehow. When she finally decoded it, she immediately sent the results to Jake. "Captain, you need to see this," Lisa said over the comm link. "I've translated a section that reads like a journal entry. One of the architects wrote about visiting Earth directly, landing in Africa about 100,000 years ago. Jake came to the research lab where Lisa had set up her equipment. She showed him the translation on her screen. The architect wrote about watching a group of early humans," Lisa explained. "They were hunting a large animal, something like a buffalo. The humans had primitive spears and no way to kill the animal quickly, so they just followed it. For 2 days and 2 nights, they tracked that animal without stopping. They didn't have the animal's speed or strength, but they had something else." "What?" Jake asked. "Endurance," Lisa said. The architect wrote that they had never seen anything like it. The animal would run until it was exhausted, then rest. But the humans never stopped. They kept coming, slowly and steadily. Eventually, the animal collapsed from heat exhaustion, and the humans killed it. The architect called it the most terrifying hunt they had ever witnessed. Readers, Jake read the translated text himself. The aliens' words painted a picture of human hunters who simply refused to quit. No matter how far the prey ran, the humans followed. No matter how long it took, they kept coming. It wasn't a hunt based on speed or power. It was a hunt based on the absolute refusal to give up. The architect wrote something else, Lisa said quietly. "They said that any species with this kind of determination would eventually conquer the stars, that nothing would stop them because stopping wasn't in their nature. They recommended that their people avoid Earth at all costs and warn others to do the same." Jake thought about his own life, about the challenges he had faced and overcome. He had lost his family in an accident when he was young, but he had kept going. He had failed the academy entrance exam twice before passing. He had crashed a shuttle during training, but had climbed back into the cockpit the next day. It was just what humans did. They fell down and got back up. Was that really so terrifying to other species? Did aliens give up more easily when things got hard? Back on Earth, Admiral Palmer convened his emergency council. Scientists, military leaders, diplomats, and philosophers gathered to discuss what the prophecy meant for humanity's future. The debate was intense. Some argued that humans should prove the prophecy wrong by being peaceful and cautious in their expansion. Others said that trying to change human nature was impossible and pointless. Humans were who they were, and they should be proud of it. A xenobiologist named Dr. Patricia Monroe presented research on the species that had left the warnings. The architects were peaceful, she explained to the council. All 12 species in their alliance were. They had evolved on worlds with abundant resources and few predators. Competition wasn't part of their nature the way it is for humans. So they couldn't understand us, Palmer said. Exactly, Patricia replied. They looked at human persistence and saw something monstrous, because nothing in their experience prepared them for it. A species that survives through cooperation and abundance can't comprehend a species that survives through determination and adaptation. Commander Amy Collins spoke up. But that doesn't change the fact that the warnings are out there. Other species will read them and make their own judgments about us. We need to control the narrative. How? Someone asked. By making first contact on our terms, Amy said. By showing other species who humans really are, not who the architects thought we would become. Yes, we're persistent. Yes, we don't give up. But we also create art, music, and literature. We build societies based on justice and compassion. We're more than just survivors. The council debated for hours. Finally, Palmer made a decision. We continue exploration and expansion as planned, but we increase our efforts to find and document every warning beacon we can. Knowledge is power. We need to know exactly what the galaxy has been told about us, he turned to Amy. And you need to prepare humanity for first contact with species that might already fear us. We can't change the past or control what the architects wrote, but we can control how we present ourselves moving forward. Over the following months, human ships spread out across known space looking for more beacons. Each one they found added to the picture. The architects had been incredibly detailed in their observations. They had documented human warfare, noting how humans fought with incredible ferocity when defending their homes. They had recorded human exploration, watching as ancient peoples sailed into unknown oceans with no guarantee they would ever return. But the architects had also noted human compassion. They wrote about how humans cared for their sick and elderly, something most predatory species didn't do. They documented human art and music, recognizing that humans had a deep need to create beauty, even in harsh conditions. The prophecy wasn't entirely negative. It simply stated that humans were different, that they possessed traits that would make them formidable when they reached the stars. The question was whether those traits would make humans destroyers or protectors. Jake Morrison continued his mission, exploring new systems and searching for signs of other civilizations. The horizon's edge ventured into regions no human had visited before, and with each jump through space, Jake wondered if somewhere out there, another species was reading the warnings and deciding what to do about the humans who refused to fall. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries. Humans had only scratched the surface of what was out there, but now they knew that their reputation had preceded them. Built by ancient aliens who had watched humanity's ancestors and seen the future written in their refusal to surrender. Katie Sullivan summed it up one evening as the crew gathered in the mess hall. The architects were right about what we are, she said, but they couldn't predict what we would choose to do with it. That's up to us. Ben Carter raised his cup in a toast. Then let's make sure we choose well. Jake joined the toast, knowing that soon, very soon, humanity would make contact with other species. When that day came, the warnings would be known to both sides. How humans handled that moment would determine everything that came after. The prophecy had given them a reputation. Now, they had to decide if they would live up to it or prove it wrong. Either way, humanity's journey into the stars had just become far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The message arrived without warning. One moment Jake Morrison was charting a new system near the edge of human exploration, and the next moment every communication channel on the horizon's edge lit up with an incoming transmission. The signal was strong, deliberate, and definitely not human. "Captain, I'm picking up a coded message," Katie Sullivan said from her station. Her hands moved quickly across the controls. "It's using mathematical sequences as a foundation. They're trying to establish communication. Jake felt his heart rate increase. This was it. First contact. Every human who ventured into space had wondered if this moment would come, and now it was happening. Can you decode it? Working on it, Katie said. The math is universal, so that part is easy. They're building a translation matrix. Give me a few minutes. Ben Carter moved to tactical stations, not threatening but ready. Should we go to alert status? Not yet, Jake said. Let's see what they want first. But keep shields ready just in case. Katie worked for another 5 minutes. Then suddenly the view screen changed. An alien face appeared, and Jake had to stop himself from stepping back in surprise. The being had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on its face, skin that looked like polished stone, and a mouth that moved in ways human mouths couldn't. Greetings, human vessel, the alien said. The voice came through, perfectly translated, though Jake knew he was hearing the result of extremely advanced software. I am Ambassador Zira of the Lumina Collective. We have been monitoring your exploration of this region and wish to make formal contact. 1. Jake straightened his uniform and stepped forward. This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth Exploration Vessel Horizon's Edge. On behalf of humanity, I accept your greeting and wish to establish peaceful communication. Zira's face did something that might have been a smile. We are pleased. However, Captain Morrison, we must speak frankly. We know about the prophecy. We have found the warning beacons left by the architects. We know what they predicted about your species. Jake had known this conversation would come eventually, but he still felt a knot form in his stomach. Then, we've found them too. We've read what the architects wrote about us. We assumed as much, Zira said. That is why I am contacting you directly, rather than through official channels. The Lumina Collective believes in giving every species a fair chance, regardless of what ancient warnings might say. But you should know that not all species in the galactic community share our view. How many species are out there? Jake asked. 17 confirmed spacefaring civilizations, including yours. Zira replied. We have formed a loose council to discuss matters of mutual interest and prevent conflicts. The discovery of the architect warnings has created significant debate about how to handle humanity's emergence into galactic society. Katie looked at Jake with concern. 17 species, all of them likely more advanced than humanity, and all of them aware of the prophecy. The political situation was even more complex than anyone had imagined. What does your council want from us? Jake asked. That is what we need to determine, Zira said. I am extending an invitation to you and your crew to visit Waypoint 7, a neutral station where the council meets. It is time for humanity to address the concerns that the prophecy has raised. Jake knew he couldn't make this decision alone. I need to consult with my superiors on Earth. Of course, Zira said. But Captain, I would advise speed. There are factions within the council that would prefer to handle the human problem before your species becomes too established in this region of space. The Vexen Empire, in particular, sees you as a threat. The transmission ended and Jake immediately sent an emergency message to Earth Command. Admiral Palmer's response came within hours, which was remarkably fast given the distance involved. The message was clear: accept the invitation and represent humanity well. Jake stood before his crew in the briefing room. Katie, Ben, Lisa Grant, and 3 other senior officers looked back at him with various expressions of concern and excitement. We're going to this council meeting, Jake said. But we're not going alone. Earth is sending a diplomatic team to meet us at the coordinates Zira provided. Commander Amy Collins and negotiator Paul Dennett will join us along with military advisors and additional security. What's our play here? Ben asked. Do we try to downplay the prophecy or embrace it? Neither, Jake said. We be honest. The architects were right about some things and wrong about others. Our job is to show these species who humans really are. The journey to Waypoint 7 took 3 weeks. During that time, more information came in from Earth about the species they would be meeting. Intelligence had compiled data from the warning beacons and other sources to create profiles of the major players. The Vexen Empire was a military powerhouse that had dominated their region of space for centuries. They were large, powerful, and aggressive. They saw the universe in terms of strength and submission, and they expected other species to bow to their superiority. The Lumina Collective were beings of crystalline structure who valued knowledge and peaceful coexistence. They were scientists and philosophers who had evolved beyond physical conflict long ago. The Krath were a hive mind species, billions of individuals sharing one consciousness. They were efficient, logical, and had little understanding of individual identity the way humans experienced it. There were others as well, each with their own nature and their own view of the prophecy. Some were curious about humans, others fearful, and a few actively hostile. Commander Amy Collins arrived with her team 2 days before they reached Waypoint 7. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp intelligence and decades of diplomatic experience. She gathered Jake and his senior staff for a planning session. Our goal is simple, Amy explained. We need to convince the Council that humanity deserves a place in the galactic community. That means addressing the prophecy directly but also showing what the architects couldn't see about us. What did they miss? Choice, Amy said. The architects predicted our capabilities but not our values. They saw what we could do, but not what we would choose to do. That's our advantage. Paul Dennett, the negotiator, added his thoughts. We should expect the Vexen to be aggressive. They'll demand restrictions on human expansion, maybe even demand we submit to their authority. We can't agree to that, but we also can't appear weak or threatening. Walk a fine line, Jake said. Show strength but not aggression. Exactly, Paul replied. Waypoint 7 appeared on their sensors like a jewel floating in space. The station was massive, easily 10 times the size of anything humans had built. It was shaped like a ring with multiple docking ports extending from the central hub. Ships from different species were already docked there, their designs ranging from elegant and organic to brutal and mechanical. Jake piloted the Horizon's Edge toward an assigned docking port, following the coordinates Zira had provided. As the ship locked into place, he took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's future among the stars. The airlock opened, and Jake stepped through with his team. The corridor beyond was designed to accommodate multiple species, with varying gravity zones and atmosphere controls. A guide waited for them, a floating sphere that pulsed with light and spoke through a universal translator. Welcome to Waypoint 7, the sphere said. Please follow me to the council chamber. They walked through corridors filled with beings from other worlds. Jake saw creatures that looked like walking plants, others that seemed to be made of liquid metal, and some that defied easy description. All of them stopped and stared as the humans passed by. Some looked curious, others concerned, and a few actively hostile. The council chamber was an enormous room with seating arranged in a circle. Each species had a designated area, with controls and displays suited to their specific needs. At the center was an open floor where speakers could address the entire assembly. Jake and his team took their assigned positions. Ambassador Zira was already there, her crystalline form glowing softly. Across the chamber, Jake saw the Vexen representatives, massive beings covered in armor plating that looked more like weapons than protection. The lead Vexen, a commander named Thrax, rose from his seat. His voice boomed through the translation system. So the prophecy species finally shows itself. How convenient that you come to us after spreading across multiple systems without permission. Amy Collins stepped forward calmly. We were unaware that exploration required permission. Our understanding was that space belongs to no one species. Every Down, every Tino. We're Completino. Space belongs to those strong enough to claim it, Thrax shot back. And the architects were clear about your species. You are dangerous, unpredictable, and driven by the need to conquer. The Council must decide how to contain this threat before it grows beyond control. Jake felt anger rise in his chest but forced it down. Getting emotional would only prove the Vexen's point. Zira spoke up, her voice calm and measured. Commander Thrax speaks from fear, not reason. The prophecy describes capabilities, not intentions. We should judge humanity by their actions, not by what an extinct species predicted. Their actions? Thrax gestured to a display that showed a map of human exploration. Look at how quickly they spread. Look at how many systems they have entered in just a few decades. This is exactly what the architects warned about. Katie Sullivan stepped forward, surprising Jake. She addressed the Council with confidence. We explore, because it's in our nature to be curious about the universe. We spread because our homeworld taught us that staying in one place means risking extinction. But exploration is not conquest. We have not claimed any inhabited worlds. We have not attacked any other species. We have not even known you existed until now. A new voice spoke up. This one, belonging to a Krath representative. The being looked like a collection of insects, held together in a vaguely humanoid shape. The Hive has studied the prophecy carefully. The architects noted that humans possess persistence beyond all other species. They described how your ancestors would pursue prey for days without rest. How do you respond to this characterization? 47. Jake decided it was time to speak. It's true. Humans are persistent. On our world, survival meant never giving up. We evolved to keep going when other species would stop, but that same persistence drives us to cure diseases, to create art, to explore the universe, not to conquer it but to understand it. The architects saw our determination as a weapon. We see it as a tool for building a better future. Pretty words, Thrax said dismissively. But words mean nothing. The prophecy states that humans will never bow to superior force, that they would rather die than surrender. Does the human species deny this? Amy Collins met Thrax's gaze without flinching. We don't deny it. Humans value freedom above almost everything else. We have fought wars against tyranny throughout our history. We have overthrown dictators and resisted occupation. If that makes us dangerous in your eyes, then perhaps you should ask yourself why the idea of a species that won't submit frightens you so much. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species seemed impressed by Amy's boldness, while others appeared more concerned. Thrax's armor plates seemed to darken with anger. Before anyone else could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The floating guide sphere appeared in the center of the chamber, pulsing with urgent red light. Emergency alert, the sphere announced. Unknown vessels have entered the system. They are not responding to hails and are on an intercept course with waypoint 7. All ships are ordered to defensive positions. Jake looked at Ben, who was already checking his communicator for data from the horizon's edge. Ben's face went pale. Captain, you need to see this. The ships that just appeared, they match descriptions from the architect beacons. They're using technology that's millions of years old. The council chamber fell silent as the realization hit everyone at once. The debate about humanity was suddenly irrelevant. Something from the past had returned. And whatever it was heading straight for them. The council chamber transformed from a place of debate into a command center within seconds. Displays lit up showing the approaching fleet, and Jake Morrison felt his breath catch. There were dozens of ships, each one massive and dark, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in perfect formation, cutting through space with obvious hostile intent. Commander Thrax of the Vexen was the first to react. His people were warriors, and he immediately took charge. All Vexen vessels moved to intercept formation. We will show these ancient relics what real military power looks like. Ambassador Zira tried to interject. Commander, we should attempt communication first. We don't know their intentions. Their intentions are clear. Thrax shot back. They are heading straight for this station without responding to hails. That is an act of war. Thanks for watching. Their intentions are clear. Their intentions are cleared for this station. Their intentions are clear. Their intentions are clear. Jake watched as tactical displays showed the Vexen fleet moving into position. He counted 20 warships, each one bristling with weapons. The Vexen had dominated this region of space for centuries through military strength, and they were confident in their ability to handle any threat. Katie Sullivan was frantically working with Lisa Grant, comparing the incoming ships to descriptions found in the architect warning beacons. "Captain, I've got a match," Katie said urgently. These ships belonged to something the architects called the Devourers. According to the records, the Devourers were the reason the architects disappeared. They consumed entire civilizations. "How did the architects fight them?" Jake asked. Lisa pulled up translated text on her display. "They didn't win. The architects wounded the Devourers badly enough to force them into hibernation. But it cost the architects everything. All 12 species in their alliance were wiped out in the war." Ben Carter had been listening to the communication channels. "The Vexen are engaging. Weapons range in 30 seconds. The council members watched the displays as the two fleets came together. Jake had to admit that the Vexen knew how to fight. Their ships moved with precision, creating overlapping fields of fire, and using their superior numbers to surround the Devourer vessels. The first Vexen volley hit with tremendous force. Energy weapons and kinetic projectiles slammed into the dark ships. For a moment, it looked like the attack was successful. Then the Devourer ships seemed to ripple, and the damage simply vanished as if it had never happened. "They're regenerating," Katie said in shock. "The ships are repairing themselves faster than the Vexen can damage them." The Devourers returned fire. Their weapons were different from anything Jake had seen before. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they fired something that looked like tears in space itself. When these weapons hit Vexen ships, the shields didn't just fail, they collapsed inward, crushing the vessels like paper. In less than 5 minutes, half the Vexen fleet was destroyed. The remaining ships tried to retreat, but the Devourers pursued with ruthless efficiency. Commander Thrax watched from the council chamber as his armada, the pride of the Vexen Empire, was torn apart. "This is impossible," Thrax said, his voice hollow. "Nothing can defeat Vexen military might." "The architects could," Jake said quietly. "And even they lost." The Devourer fleet turned toward Waypoint 7. They would reach the station in less than an hour. The council members began talking over each other, panic spreading through the chamber. Some species suggested immediate evacuation. Others wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. Jake made a decision. He turned to Ben. "Contact the Horizon's Edge. Tell them to power up all systems and prepare for combat." "Captain, we're an exploration vessel," Ben said. "We don't have the weapons to fight those things." "I know," Jake said. "But I'm not going to run away while that station full of civilians gets destroyed." He turned to Amy Collins. "Commander, I need authorization to contact Earth Command and request military support." Amy nodded without hesitation. "You have it. Do what you need to do." Jake used his communicator to send an emergency transmission to Admiral Palmer. The message was simple. "Hostile alien force. Attacking neutral station. Request immediate military response. All available ships." The reply came back faster than Jake expected. Palmer must have been monitoring the situation. "Authorization granted. Human Defense Fleet is jumping to your location now. ETA, 20 minutes. Hold the line." "Captain." Jake felt a surge of relief followed immediately by dread. Earth was sending warships, which meant revealing military capabilities humanity had been keeping quiet. The galaxy was about to learn that humans hadn't spent the last decades just building exploration vessels. He walked to the center of the council chamber and addressed everyone present. "Help is coming. The Human Defense Fleet will be here in 20 minutes. Until then, we need to evacuate civilians from the station and buy time." "Your defense fleet?" Thrax said with contempt despite his defeat. "What can humans possibly do that the Vexen could not?" We can refuse to give up, Jake said simply. It's what we do best. The evacuation began immediately. Civilian ships started undocking from Waypoint 7 and jumping to safe coordinates. Jake and his team ran back to the horizon's edge. As soon as they were aboard, Jake took his position in the captain's chair. All crew to combat stations, he ordered. Ben, I need you to run tactical. Katie, work with Lisa to analyze those Devourer ships. Find me a weakness. Captain, we're not equipped for this fight, his first officer said. I know, Jake replied. But we're going to fight anyway, because if we don't, those civilians won't make it out in time. The horizon's edge undocked and moved to intercept the Devourer fleet. The exploration vessel was small compared to the massive dark ships, but Jake positioned it directly in their path. If the Devourers wanted to reach the station, they would have to go through him first. They're targeting us, Ben said from tactical. Multiple weapon locks detected. Evasive pattern delta, Jake ordered. Make us hard to hit. The Devourers fired their reality-tearing weapons. Jake threw the ship into a hard turn, feeling the gravity compensators struggle to keep up. The weapons missed by meters, close enough that Jake could see the space around them distort. Return fire, Jake said. All weapons. The horizon's edge had minimal armament, just enough to deal with pirates or debris. The weapons fire looked pitiful against the massive Devourer vessels, but Jake wasn't trying to destroy them. He was just trying to get their attention and buy time. It worked. 3 of the Devourer ships broke formation to pursue the horizon's edge. Jake led them away from the station, weaving between asteroids and using every trick he knew to stay ahead of their weapons. Captain, I'm detecting slip space signatures, Katie said suddenly. Multiple contacts appearing at the system edge. It's the human fleet. Jake allowed himself a small smile. About time. Put them on screen. The view screen changed to show the incoming human vessels. Jake counted 30 ships emerging from slip space in perfect formation. But these weren't exploration vessels. These were warships, purpose-built for combat, with designs humanity had kept classified until this moment. The lead ship was the carrier Independence. A massive vessel bristling with fighter bays and weapons platforms. Flanking it were 2 battleships, the Liberty and Defiance, heavily armored and armed with enough firepower to level cities. Around them were cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels, all of them carrying the insignia of the Earth Defense Forces. This is Admiral Ryan Palmer, commanding the Independence to all ships in this system. Palmer's voice came through clearly. We are here to provide humanitarian assistance and defense against hostile forces. All civilian vessels continue evacuation. All combat-capable vessels form up on my position. The Devourer fleet stopped its pursuit of the horizon's edge and turned to face this new threat. Jake brought his ship around and joined the human formation, taking position with the other smaller vessels. All ships, weapons free, Palmer ordered. Show these things what happens when they threaten innocents. The human fleet opened fire. Unlike the Vexen, who had used traditional energy weapons, human ships employed a mixture of technologies. Some used kinetic weapons. Massive projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. Others used missiles with specialized warheads. A few employed experimental weapons that humanity had been developing for decades. The Devourers began their regeneration process, but human weapons kept coming. Jake watched as the tactical display showed round after round, slamming into the dark ships. The regeneration was fast, but the humans were faster, pouring more damage onto the targets before they could fully repair. They're adapting, Katie warned. The Devourer shields are adjusting to our kinetic weapons. Switch to missiles, Palmer ordered. All ships, pattern Gamma. The fleet immediately changed tactics. Hundreds of missiles launched from the human ships, each one following a different flight path to make interception difficult. The Devourers tried to shoot them down, but human missile doctrine was based on overwhelming numbers and unpredictable approaches. The missiles hit, and this time the damage stuck. The Devourer ships rocked under the impacts, their regeneration systems struggling to keep up. But they were still dangerous, and they returned fire with their reality-tearing weapons. The human fleet scattered, each ship moving on its own trajectory to avoid the devastating attacks. Jake watched, as one destroyer wasn't fast enough. The Devourer weapon hit it directly, and the ship simply ceased to exist, crushed out of reality itself. "Commodore Harper is down," someone reported over the fleet channel. "The destroyer Washington is destroyed." Jake felt anger and sorrow mixed together. 60 crew members had just died in an instant. But there was no time to mourn. The battle was still raging. "All fighters launch," Palmer ordered. "I want those Devourer ships swarmed." Hundreds of small fighter craft poured out of the Independence's bays. They were like angry insects, too small and fast for the Devourer weapons to effectively target. The fighters wove between the dark ships, firing at point-blank range and then darting away before retaliation could come. Jake watched one pilot, Lieutenant Sam Hughes, lead his squadron in a daring attack run directly through the middle of the Devourer formation. It was reckless and brilliant at the same time. Exactly the kind of crazy maneuver that only humans would attempt. "They're breaking formation," Ben reported. "The Devourers are having trouble tracking so many small targets." "That's the idea," Jake said. "In nature, pack hunters take down bigger prey by attacking from multiple angles. The prey can't defend everywhere at once." Katie was still analyzing the Devourer ships with Lisa's help. "Captain, I think I've found something. The Devourer vessels are linked together through some kind of quantum communication network. That's how they coordinate so perfectly. If we could disrupt that link, they might lose cohesion." "Where?" Jake immediately opened a channel to the Independence. "Admiral Palmer, we have a possible vulnerability. The enemy ships use quantum linking for coordination. If we can jam that link, we might be able to break their formation." "What do you need?" Palmer asked. "Permission to try something dangerous," Jake said. "The Horizon's Edge has electronic warfare capabilities. If we can get close enough to their formation center, we might be able to deploy disruption drones." "How close?" Palmer asked. "Very close," Jake admitted. "Close enough that if it doesn't work, we won't be able to retreat." There was a pause. Then Palmer spoke. "Do it. But Captain Morrison, you make damn sure it works. I don't want to lose you." Jake turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral. Ben, plot us a course, straight into the middle of their formation. Katie, prep the disruption drones. Everyone else, hold on tight. This is going to be rough." The Horizon's Edge broke away from the human fleet and accelerated toward the Devourer ships at maximum speed. The dark vessels immediately targeted the small exploration ship. Sensing the threat, reality-tearing weapons fired from multiple angles. Jake pushed the ship to its limits, dodging and weaving through the deadly fire. His hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. Using every bit of skill he had gained over 20 years in space, the ship shuddered as near misses distorted the space around them. "Almost there," Jake said through gritted teeth. "Katie, get ready." "Drones armed and ready," Katie confirmed. They reached the center of the Devourer formation. For one brief moment, Jake was surrounded by the massive dark ships. So close, he could see the strange patterns that moved across their surfaces. "Now!" Jake shouted. Katie launched the disruption drones. The small devices scattered in all directions, each one broadcasting a powerful signal designed to interfere with quantum communications. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the Devourer ships went dark, their coordination severed. "It worked!" Ben yelled. "They've lost their link! Get us out of here!" Jake ordered. The Horizon's Edge dove away from the formation as the Devourer ships began firing wildly, no longer able to coordinate their attacks. The confusion gave the human fleet exactly what they needed. Admiral Ryan Palmer saw the opening and took it. The moment the Devourer ships lost their coordination, he issued orders across the fleet channel. "All ships, concentrated fire on the lead vessel. Pour everything you have into that target." The human fleet responded with brutal efficiency. Every ship focused on a single Devourer vessel, overwhelming its regeneration with sustained fire from dozens of different angles. Kinetic rounds, missiles, and energy weapons all struck the same target within seconds of each other. The dark ship tried to adapt, tried to regenerate, but there was simply too much damage coming too fast. For the first time since the battle began, a Devourer vessel showed signs of failing. Its surface cracked, and pieces began breaking away. Jake Morrison watched from the horizon's edge as the massive ship finally came apart, exploding in a flash of light that briefly illuminated the entire battlefield. The crew cheered, but Jake knew the fight was far from over. There were still more than 30 Devourer ships out there. "Captain, they're trying to re-establish their quantum link," Katie Sullivan warned. "The disruption is only temporary." "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 5 more minutes," Katie said. Jake opened a channel to Palmer. "Admiral, the disruption won't last. We need to use this time to hit them as hard as we can." "Agreed," Palmer replied. "All ships, weapons free, target at will, make every shot count." The human fleet spread out, each ship selecting targets and engaging with whatever weapons they had available. The Devourers were still dangerous even without coordination, but they were no longer the unstoppable force they had seemed at the start of the battle. Jake watched Lieutenant Sam Hughes lead another attack run, his fighter squadron darting between the dark ships like birds of prey. Sam was taking crazy risks, flying closer to the enemy than anyone should, but his tactics were working. His squadron had damaged 3 Devourer ships already, but the Devourers were learning. One of the dark ships anticipated Sam's next move and fired its reality-tearing weapon directly into his path. Sam had nowhere to dodge. Jake watched in horror as the weapon was about to hit. Then Sam did something insane. Instead of trying to evade, he accelerated straight toward the weapon. At the last possible second, he ejected from his fighter, the tiny escape pod shooting out at a different angle. The fighter took the hit and vanished. But Sam survived, tumbling through space in his pod. "Get a recovery ship to Hughes now," Palmer ordered. "That man just saved himself through pure crazy, and I want him back in one piece." The battle raged on. Human ships took damage, and some were destroyed. But for every ship they lost, they took down 2 Devourer vessels. The key was adaptation. Every time the Devourers adjusted their tactics or their defenses, the humans changed their approach. When shields adapted to one weapon type, humans switched to another. When the Devourers tried to surround human ships, the humans scattered and regrouped elsewhere. It was exactly what the architects had warned about. Humans never fought the same way twice. They learned, adapted, and overcame. But unlike the architects' fears, humans weren't using this ability to conquer. They were using it to protect. Back at Waypoint 7, the council members watched the battle through long-range sensors. They saw human ships fighting with a ferocity and determination that matched the prophecy's description. But they also saw those same humans breaking formation to rescue the crew of a damaged civilian transport. They saw human fighters providing cover for Lumina evacuation ships. They saw the horizon's edge, battered and damaged, still fighting to buy time for others to escape. Commander Thrax of the Vexen stood in silence, his earlier confidence completely shattered. His mighty fleet had been destroyed in minutes. But these humans, with their smaller numbers and supposedly inferior technology, were actually winning. Ambassador Zira approached him. "Do you understand now, Commander?" The prophecy described their capabilities, but it missed their character. Humans are persistent, yes, but they use that persistence to protect, not just to destroy. Thrax said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. The battle reached a turning point after 3 days of continuous fighting. The Devourers had lost more than half their ships, and the rest were showing signs of damage they couldn't fully repair. The human fleet was exhausted, low on ammunition, and had suffered significant casualties, but they refused to stop. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, barely able to keep his eyes open. His crew had been at combat stations for 70 hours, with only brief rest periods. The Horizon's Edge had taken damage to multiple systems and was running on backup power. but they were still in the fight. "Captain, the Devourer fleet is changing course," Ben Carter said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "They're moving away from the station and the human fleet." "Are they retreating?" Jake asked. Katie checked her sensors multiple times before answering, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "I think they are. They're heading toward the system edge at high speed." Jake opened a channel to the Independence. "Admiral, are you seeing this?" "Confirmed," Palmer replied. "The Devourers are withdrawing. Hold position and do not pursue. Let them go." The human fleet held its position and watched as the remaining Devourer ships fled the system and disappeared into dark space. After 3 days of brutal combat, the battle was finally over. The silence that followed felt strange after so much chaos. Jake looked around his bridge at his exhausted crew. Katie had her head down on her console, barely conscious. Ben was slumped in his chair, his hands still on the tactical controls. Lisa Grant had fallen asleep in the science station. "We did it," Jake said quietly. "We actually did it." Over the next few hours, damage reports came in from across the fleet. The human forces had lost 8 ships and hundreds of crew members. Many more ships were damaged and would need extensive repairs. But they had achieved something the architects never managed. They had defeated the Devourers and sent them running. More importantly, they had saved Waypoint 7 and the thousands of civilians from multiple species who had been trapped there. The council members began returning to the station as the all-clear signal went out. Admiral Palmer ordered Jake to return to Waypoint 7 for an emergency council session. Jake wanted to refuse, wanted to sleep for about 3 days straight. But he knew this moment was important. Humanity had proven itself in battle. Now they needed to prove themselves in peace. The council chamber was different when Jake arrived with his team. The representatives from other species looked at the humans with new eyes. Fear was still there, but it was mixed with respect and something else. Gratitude. Commander Thrax stood first. The massive Vexen warrior approached Jake directly. For a moment Jake thought there might be trouble, but then Thrax did something unexpected. He lowered his head in a gesture that was clearly a sign of respect. "Captain Morrison, I was wrong about your species," Thrax said. His voice carried none of its earlier arrogance. "The prophecy said you would never bow to superior force, that you would fight until death rather than surrender. I thought that made you a threat to be contained. Now I understand it makes you the strongest allies anyone could have." Jake extended his hand, a human gesture of peace. After a moment's hesitation, Thrax reached out and clasped it. The warriors of 2 species, so different in nature, acknowledging each other as equals. Ambassador Zira addressed the full council. "What we have witnessed changes everything. The prophecy was correct in describing human capabilities. They are persistent, adaptive, and absolutely refuse to accept defeat. But the architects missed something crucial. They saw these traits as purely destructive. But humans have shown us they can be protective as well." A representative from the Krath hive mind spoke. "The hive calculates that without human intervention, this station and all aboard would have been consumed by the Devourers. The debt is acknowledged." Other species added their voices. Some spoke of how human ships had protected their evacuation vessels. Others mentioned how human tactics had prevented a massacre. Even species that had been most fearful of humanity were now seeing them in a new light. Jake stood and addressed the council, his voice carrying despite his exhaustion. "The architects were right about us in some ways. We are survivors. We are persistent. We do refuse to give up. But they were wrong about what that means. Yes, we can be dangerous enemies, but we can also be loyal friends. Yes, we are driven to explore and expand, but we do so to learn, not to conquer. Yes, we have fought wars throughout our history, but we have also built societies based on justice and compassion." He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. "The prophecy gave you a warning about humanity. but it was incomplete. It told you what we could do, but not why we do it. Humans fight because we protect what we love. We persist because we have survived too many extinctions to give up easily. We adapt because our world taught us to change or die. These traits make us formidable, yes, but they also make us exactly the kind of allies you want when ancient threats return from the darkness. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, Zira spoke. The Lumina Collective moves that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. The Vexen Empire seconds this motion, Thrax added. Furthermore, we propose a military alliance with humanity. Our strength, combined with their tactics, would make both our peoples safer. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was officially recognized as the 17th member of the Galactic Council and granted a seat among the other spacefaring civilizations. It was a historic moment, the fulfillment of humanity's long dream of joining the greater galactic community. But Jake knew the real work was just beginning. Commander Amy Collins immediately began drafting treaties and agreements. Paul Dennett worked with representatives from other species to establish trade relationships and cultural exchanges. Katie Sullivan set up scientific collaboration programs to share knowledge between human and alien researchers. In the weeks that followed, the story of the battle spread across the galaxy. Species that had found the Architect warnings and feared humanity now saw them as potential protectors. The prophecy had warned of a dangerous species, but humans had proven they could control that danger and direct it toward good purposes. Jake Morrison remained at Waypoint 7 for 2 months, helping to coordinate reconstruction efforts and serving as humanity's primary representative to the Council. During that time, he got to know many of the alien species personally. He learned that the Lumina valued knowledge above all else, and that humans could offer unique perspectives on science and philosophy. He discovered that the Vexen respected strength but had never encountered anyone who respected them back without fear. Lieutenant Sam Hughes recovered from his ejection and was given a commendation for his actions during the battle. He became something of a celebrity among both humans and aliens. The pilot who was crazy enough to eject into space rather than accept death. Dr. Ellen Price and her research team analyzed the remains of destroyed Devourer ships and made discoveries that advanced human technology by decades. The quantum linking system, the regeneration technology, and the reality warping weapons all provided insights that would help humanity defend against future threats. Lisa Grant continued translating Architect texts and made a profound discovery. In one of the later warning beacons, written shortly before the Architect's final battle with the Devourers, there was a different kind of message. It wasn't a warning. It was a hope. The architect who wrote it had acknowledged that humanity might indeed be dangerous, but had also expressed the belief that perhaps that was what the galaxy needed. Perhaps a species that refused to fall was exactly what was required to stand against threats that had destroyed countless civilizations. The writer had hoped that if humanity ever read these words, they would choose to be guardians rather than conquerors. Jake read the translation and felt a weight settle on his shoulders. It was a responsibility, but it was one he was willing to accept. Humanity had been given a choice by fate and circumstances. They could be the threat the prophecy described, or they could be something better. As Jake prepared to return to Earth for the first time in over a year, he stood on an observation deck at Waypoint 7 and looked out at the stars. Ships from 17 different species moved through space around the station, each one unique. Each one representing a different path evolution had taken across the galaxy. Katie joined him at the window. "Thinking about the prophecy?" she asked. "Thinking about the future," Jake replied. "The architects left us a warning, but they also left us a challenge. They told the galaxy what we could become. Now, we have to decide what we will become." Jake replied. "We'll choose right," Katie said with confidence. "We always do. Eventually. Sometimes it takes us a while, and sometimes we make mistakes along the way. But humans always figure out the right path in the end." Jake smiled. "I hope you're right, because the galaxy is watching now." Every species that finds those warning beacons will compare the prophecy to our actions. We're going to be judged by a standard that was set 3 million years ago. Good, Katie said. Let them judge us. Let them see that humans can be exactly as persistent, determined, and unstoppable as the architects predicted, and that we use those traits to protect instead of destroy. Let them see that the prophecy was both right and wrong. Right about what we are, wrong about what we would choose to do with it. Jake looked at his friend and science officer, this woman who had helped him discover the first warning beacon all those months ago. When did you become so philosophical? I've been spending time with the Lumina, Katie said with a grin. Turns out crystalline beings, who think about existence all day, are pretty interesting to talk to. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ships move through space. Human vessels mixed with alien ones, former enemies becoming allies, and a prophecy that had warned of doom becoming instead a story of hope. The architects had been right. Humans were the species that refused to fall. But what the ancient aliens had failed to understand was that humans would also refuse to let others fall. That persistence, that determination, that absolute refusal to give up. It applied to protecting others just as much as it applied to survival. The prophecy had warned about one threat: humans. But the galaxy was learning that humans were also its greatest hope, the species that would never bow, never break, never stop pushing forward, was now standing guard. And as long as humans existed, as long as they maintained their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, the civilizations of the galaxy could rest a little easier. Because when ancient threats returned from the darkness, when impossible odds appeared, when all seemed lost, there would be one species that would stand up and fight. Not because they were fearless, but because fear never stopped them before and wouldn't stop them now. The architects had tried to warn the galaxy. Instead, they had given humanity the greatest compliment any species could receive. They had recognized that humans were survivors, fighters, and protectors all at once. The prophecy was a warning, but it was also a promise. Humans had arrived among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.